Hello, everyone. With you today is Mr. Randy Johnson, and today we are going to learn and go over phrasal verbs. This is from Book 6, Unit 8, and this is for your listening and speaking grammar. So let's begin. Okay, so before we get into the subjects, let's just talk about what are the basic parts of a sentence. I'll give you a minute to think about it. There's 3 parts. Now, the order is really important, right? Because if the order is off, then the sentence becomes unintelligible or incorrect grammatically. So remember, in the first place, there's a name. In the second place, there's a name. In the third place, there's a name. I'll give you a couple more seconds, and then I'll write the parts of the sentence. Good. So the first part, as you got it, it's called the subject. Okay. So that is for English, in most cases, to have a complete sentence, you will need the subject in the beginning position of the sentence. And then we have the verb in the middle, or right after the subject, I should say. And then last, we have what we call the object. Okay. Not all sentences need objects, but every sentence does need a subject. Okay. And so with subjects, here, this is where you'll have a lot of nouns. Okay. And the verb is where you'll have verbs. And then objects, you can have nouns. You can have, we call them predicates, but we can just say adjectives for sake of being simple. Prepositional phrases, which is a preposition plus a noun, okay? And so speaking up about preposition, what is a preposition? I'll give you guys some seconds to think. So you're right. Now, a preposition is a word that talks about position. So the preposition. So it's a word of position that positions typically the noun after it. So, for example, a preposition could be of, or next to, or from. There are many prepositions, but the noun that comes from it tells you the relationship to that preposition. So, of New York tells you that the subject, or maybe the verb that comes before it, is of New York, or about 6 o'clock. It tells you that the subject is something that will happen about 6 o'clock. And so the prepositions are things that typically either modify or they put into context the verb or the subject of the sentence. And we'll learn more. Now, why is this important? Because we're going to be talking about phrasal verbs. And phrasal verbs are a unique combination between verbs and prepositions. Okay? And it's okay if it doesn't make sense right now. We will continue to talk about this as we move forward in today's lesson. Okay? And so, what other prepositions did I not write? Why don't you write a few more prepositions? Now, it's important that you have pen and paper, and if you have your books with you, that you be following along. It's best that you interact with the materials so you can really get the most out of the learning today. Good. So maybe you added through, that's a preposition, or maybe you added by, by, that's a preposition. There are many prepositions. I just wrote just a couple for you to get an idea what we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, so again, we always need to read the instructions first before we start answering the questions so that we have an idea of what is being asked. So grammar for speaking, 1, work with a partner, read the conversation and notice the bold-faced phrases. How's A's bold-faced phrase different from B's? Okay, so let's read it together. A, I love my laptop, but I can't turn it off without getting a message error. Without getting an error message. B, take it right back to the store. The tech people can look into it. I'll give you a minute or so and tell me the difference that you notice with the bold-faced phrases here. So this is the dark black font here and the bold-faced phrase here. So I'll give you about a minute to think about it. Notice any difference. Now remember, we did talk about in the last slide, we talked about the subject, the verb, and also the object. And then we also talked about prepositions, how prepositions tend to modify the subject of the verb that comes before it, the location of a noun that comes after the preposition. So keep that in mind, okay? So it might be helpful just to think is to identify the verb, identify a preposition if there is one, and then identify some other word in there. Is it a noun? Is it a pronoun? And then write it down and let's talk about it in a pair of seconds. Okay, so let's analyze together A. Okay, so here we have turn it off. What is turn? Is turn a noun, a verb, an object? What is turn? Turn is a verb. Now, it, is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an object? Or a subject, a verb or object? So this is a pronoun, okay? So it is a pronoun, but it comes after the verb, and so this occupies the space of object. Okay? And then off. What is off? Correct, it's a preposition. Good. Okay. Now let's look at B. Look into it. So look, what is look? Yes, look is a verb. And then into is a preposition, correct? And then it is an object. It's a pronoun, but it's functioning in the object space. So we see two things here. We see there's a verb, an object, and a preposition in A, and there's a verb, a preposition, and an object in B. And this is going to be the building stone for the rest of our lesson today. These two examples are what we call phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs are verbs that are connected to prepositions and they have one unit of meaning, okay? If you were to separate the verb from the preposition, it would have a completely different meaning, but when you put them together, they'll have one unit of meaning. And they show up in two different ways. They show up either as separable, which means that you can have an object that cuts the verb in the preposition, like this, or inseparable means that you can't have anything that cuts between the verb and the preposition. Okay. So again, the phrasal verb is a verb. It's the verb that is connected to a preposition, and they show up in two different ways. Inseparable, which means that the verb and the preposition are side by side, and an object comes after it, or separable, which means the verb and the preposition can be split by an object and still retain its meaning. Okay? And these phrasal verbs, if the verb and the preposition are separated, they would have a completely different meaning. But when they come together, they have a particular meaning when they come together. Now, in English, these are phrasal verbs. These are things that you just have to be familiar with. And over time, you'll just memorize. There's no, how do they come to be? Probably over time. As people use the language, certain things happen in the language and certain expressions kind of become part of the language. And so that's how phrasal verbs came to be. And so as in this lesson, you'll be exposed to them. And as you're exposed to them, then you'll understand that certain verbs have prepositions that are attached to them, which give a different meaning than if the verb and the preposition were separate. And you'll see. So don't worry if it's not making sense right now. You will see a little bit later on what we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to move on. Okay, so let's learn. Okay, so phrasal verbs are verbs that use a particle. This particle is usually a preposition. Okay. So I filled in the application. They couldn't find the house, so I pointed it out. My teacher will look into it. This situation hasn't come up before. So as we see, filled in is one unit of meaning, and then pointed out is one unit of meaning. Come up is one unit of meaning, and look into is 1 unit of meaning. So for example, if I say filled by itself has a different meaning. It means maybe to pour something in or to stuff something in something. But filled in means to complete an application or to complete something by writing something in. So it's similar meaning, but it is different. Pointed it out, or pointed out, means to bring your attention to. But pointed means you can use your finger and you can point at someone to indicate something. So pointed out is bringing your mental awareness to a specific point. But if you were to take the out and just say pointed, it indicates that your finger or something that you use pointed to something. Again, the meanings are similar, but they're not the same. Next, my teacher will look into it. Okay, so look by itself means to look. I'm using my eyes, I'm looking at something. But to look into means to follow up on something, right? To research it further. Okay, so again, it comes from the same idea, but it's developed in meaning over time to mean something different. Okay, and then the last sentence, come up before. So come up means to encounter or to see the situation hasn't come before. Yeah, something that you haven't encountered before, okay, or you haven't dealt with before. Something that you're not really familiar with. But come means to move from one place to another place, to come to a place. To come up is something that's emerging, something that has now been seen as an issue that needs to be addressed. So that up changes the aspect. Again, the come up, there is a relationship to just come by itself and up by itself, but together has a different meaning, which means to encounter or to deal with, or something that is emerging. Okay, so in the next section, phrasal verbs often have a different meaning than the verb or particle by itself. So as we went over in the first part, we'll go over this part. I shut the door, which means I closed it. I climbed down the mountain means I went down the mountain. I shut down the computer means I turned it off. So do you see how that works? When you separate the verb from the preposition, they have different meanings. Sometimes those meanings are very different. Sometimes they're quite close. But when you combine a verb and a preposition, and not all verbs and prepositions do have this combined effect, but some do, and that's why they're called phrasal verbs, because it's a verb phrase, a verb plus a preposition coming together to create a new meaning, a new unit of meaning. So shut down is to turn off. And so this is a verb and this is the preposition. And then together you have what we call a phrasal verb. So two different categories merged into one to create a new meaning. Okay. Good. There'll be lots of practice, so don't worry. So let's move ahead. Okay, so most phrasal verbs are separable. This means that we can either, one, put the verb and the particle together. So I filled in the answer sheet. I cut off my friend as she was speaking. Okay, so the verb verb and the particle are together. They're right next to each other. But you can also, what this means is if they're separable, that means you can also put an object in between those two and the unit of meaning still stays the same, okay? So next line, put the object, it must be a noun or a pronoun, between the verb and the particle. I filled the answer sheet in, I cut my friend off as she was speaking, it still retains the meaning, okay? However, object pronouns can only go between the verb and the particle. Sorry, can only go between the verb and the particle, yes. So I filled it in, but it can't ever be I filled in it. I cut her off, I cut off her. So this does not work. So if you're going to use an object pronoun, then the object pronoun needs to come directly after the verb. I cut her off, I filled her in. Okay. So in the next couple of slides, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some phrasal verbs, okay? And you'll see a list of separable phrasal verbs and inseparable phrasal verbs. It'll be best for you to just be familiar with them. If you can memorize some of them, that's fine. If you can't, it's totally fine. You just need to be able to identify what is going on, right? When you see the filled in, you can identify that as a phrasal verb. So you can demonstrate that you know the verb. Okay, so let's move ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a minute or two to read through this list, familiarize yourself with it, and then we'll read it together and we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay? So take a minute or two to read through the list and to understand the meanings of the words. Okay, just a pair of seconds to continue reading through, and then we'll read through it together. Okay, now this list isn't exhaustive, but this list does give you functional kind of starting point where you can identify verbs that take prepositions or particles and they become phrasal verbs. Now again, phrasal verbs are a verb unit that's connected to typically a preposition, which provides a different meaning or different unit of meaning then they would provide being separate from each other, okay? And what we mean by separable versus inseparable is between the verb and the particle, can you put a noun or a pronoun in between it, okay? So with the separable category here on the left, you can put a noun or an object or pronoun in between, okay? So let's just read down this list. You have breakdown, which means to analyze, which means to analyze an argument or an opinion. Bring up, which means to mention a new idea in a conversation. Check out, to look at or try something new. Cut off means to interrupt. Figure out means to find an answer. Fill in means to complete or tell them about a plan or information. Give out means to give something to each person in a group. Iron out, to solve a problem and to lay out, to explain a plan or an argument. So what I would like you to do is maybe let's take a minute to write down some sentences using some of these separable phrasal verbs, and then maybe I'll give you a couple of sentences afterwards. Just take a minute to put together a sentence. So what you want to do is, since these are the phrasal verbs, you want a subject before that. So you can use, for example, Ali. Okay. So then Ali, what? He, you have to conjugate the verb, breaks down, and then what? You could say an argument. So Ali breaks down an argument. Or you can say Ali breaks down, or Ali breaks the argument down. That also works because it's separable. So you can say Ali breaks down an argument, or you can say Ali breaks down, or Ali breaks the argument down. It retains the meaning. Okay, so take a minute, write your sentences down. Okay, you don't have to use Ali, you can use I break down. You can use you break down. You can use we bring up. You can use they check out, anything, you know, just find your subject, use the verb. If it's third person singular, don't forget your S's, okay? And then your noun phrase, either argument or something. And if it's separable, try to put the noun or the pronoun in between the verb and the particle. Okay, so I'll just give you a minute and write a sentence or two, and then we'll talk about some more sentences. Okay, so let's look at figure out. So to find an answer. So you can say, I figured it out. It means I found the answer. I figured, past tense, it out, right? Or this one here. During Ramadan, we gave out iftar meals. Okay, iron out. We ironed out some problems. It means we solved some problems. Okay, great. So let's move on to the next column here, the inseparable. Now, unlike the separable, where it's a little bit more flexible, you can put the noun or the object pronoun in between the verb and the particle. Here you cannot do that. The verb and the particle must stand side by side. If you were to separate it, it wouldn't make sense, and it would change the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so inseparable, we have add up to make sense or seem true, butt in to interrupt, come up to occur or to happen, cut in to interrupt, get back to return to a topic or event, get through to succeed to finish, keep up with to go as fast as, log on, log off means to start. And it's usually something electronic, right? So the context is electronic. So I log on to a computer, I log off a game, I log on to an account, log off an account. So it's usually electronic. Log on, log off. And look into to try to understand, to check to make sure something is okay. Find the problem. So I'd like for you to take a minute or so to write some sentences that's inseparable. Now remember, inseparable means that you cannot put anything between the first word and the second word. It has to come afterwards. So take a minute, write some sentences, and then we'll go over some examples. Okay, did you get some good sentences? Now remember, the same thing, every sentence has to have at least 2 out of the 3 parts of speech, or the subject and the verb. So we can use a different subject. We can use, let's see, another name. We can use Omar. Omar adds, see, well, Omar adds up. Oh, actually, this wouldn't work, Omar. It said, you can say it adds up. Okay, so something adds up. Omar doesn't add up. So this is more in a passive sense. But the next one that works with Omar, Omar butts in the conversation. So Omar interrupts the conversation. This situation comes up. Okay. Omar cut in. It means Omar interrupted. We are very happy to get through this year safely. So get through is to succeed to finish. Okay. We logged on, our Omar logged on to his computer this morning. Omar looked into something to try to understand it. There are many examples, but you get the idea that the inseparable, the verb and the particle are not to be separated. Okay, let's look at some more examples. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute or so to read through these examples, and then we'll just go over them briefly, and then we'll get into some quiz work. Okay, just a few more seconds, finish up your reading. Okay, so separable, again, as we talked about in the last slide, you can put a noun or noun pronoun between the verb and the particle. So pass up is to decline or not do something. Point out is to call attention to. Put off is to postpone or do at a later time. Show off is to do things to try to impress people. Shut down is to turn off. Sum up is to summarize or conclude. Tear down is to destroy. Turn over is to give to someone. Use up is to finish the supply or time. And then here, to work out is to be successful in something, to achieve something. So, for example, with a sentence, I passed up a great opportunity means I declined or I didn't take advantage of this opportunity. I passed it up. Or right here, we want to tear down this wall. Or it means to destroy. And you can also say we want to tear this wall down. That works as well because it's separable. So you can say tear down this wall or tear this wall down. It has the same meaning because you can separate the particle and the verb and add the noun in between. Okay, here, sum up. This sums up the matter. It means that it concludes or it finishes the matter. This sums the matter up means it concludes or it finishes the matter. It's the same thing, right? You can separate it, okay? Here, work out. I'm so happy it worked out, which means I'm so happy that it was successful. Great, and to go over to the inseparable part, we have look up to, which means to admire or respect someone. Miss out on, which means not have a chance to do something that you enjoy, so you missed out on something. Run through, which is to rehearse, practice, or review. Stick to continue with a topic, to follow a plan, and take part in, to participate in something. Now, as you see with these inseparable ones, you see that there's more than one particle. Okay, so sometimes you'll get more than one particle. Okay. But the idea is still the same. So to look up to is to respect. So you can say, my child looks up to me, right? So my child, third person singular, looks, changes, put the S at the end, up to me. Okay, so you can't separate the looks up to. If you separate it, it completely falls apart. Oh, I'm afraid I missed out on this opportunity. Means I didn't have the chance to really enjoy this opportunity. Let's stick to the plan. Let's continue on what we discussed. I would love to take part in this conference, which means I'd like to participate in something. So how did you do? Did your sentences work? Good. So it is okay if it's still unclear. You are where you need to be. And so we're gonna have some quiz time to test what you can recognize. Okay, so don't focus on memorizing so much, focus on understanding the concept, becoming familiar with it. It's okay to play around with the words, and it's okay, again, to make mistakes. And this is why we're here. This is why we're learning. So we're going to do this quiz, and let's see how much we can recognize. Okay, so I'm going to give you about a minute or so to read through the statements, and then to write which answer you think is correct, and then we'll go over it together. Okay, so try to finish up your answers, and then we'll go over it together. Okay, let's go over it together. So the first statement: she didn't want to blank her best friend's party, so she changed her schedule so she could go. What did you choose? Okay. So it seems like the best answer would be C. She didn't want to miss out on her best friend's party because she actually wanted to enjoy it with her, so she changed her schedule. Okay, and the next one: when he found the gun, he blanked to the police. What did you choose? Turned it in to the police. Good. And this is an inseparable. Number two, in the meeting, I asked my team to blank one more time. What do you think? Actually, D, all three answers are correct. This is separable. I can't believe she just blanked our conversation. Is it A, bring up, B, butted in, C, cut off, D, cut in? Okay, let's see. We're gonna go D here. I can't believe she just cut into our conversation. 4, if we can blank this test, we will be done with the PYD. What do you think? B, get through. 5, the student blanked the test in class again, even though the teacher had warned him to stop asking. What did the student do? A, broke down, B, left in, C, figured out, or D, brought up. Student brought up the test means that the student brought to the awareness of the teacher again. And the teacher was like, no, can you stop? I've already talked about it. And the last question, I wanted to blank last night, but my friends were busy. So is it A, check out a new cafe? B, check a new cafe out? C, check it out? Or D, all 3 answers are correct? And all 3 answers are correct. Acceptable. Now, for 2 here, I just want to kind of go back. In the meeting, I asked my team to run through the plan. Works, okay? I asked my team to run the plan through one more time. It has a slightly different meaning, but it could work as well, or to run it through one more time. That works as well, okay? So it depends on the aspect and it depends on the meaning of the sentence that the other 2 could work. But you can, so there's a missing context, but to be sure, A works. But depending on the context, these other 2 could work, okay? Good. So work with a partner, complete the blog with phrasal verbs and objects, use the correct form. Put the objects between the verb and particle when possible. Use the chart below to see if a phrasal verb is separable or inseparable. Circle the other phrasal verbs in the blog, then take turns reading the blog out loud. Okay. So let's, I'll just give you a minute to look through these words and then I'll read over these words and then we'll get into that. Okay, so let's, again, you understand the concept of separable and inseparable. Separable means that you can put something in between the first word, bring, and the second word, up. Or you can put it afterwards, it's flexible. And then inseparable means that you can't put anything in between these words, okay? So, so the words, so any noun or object pronoun would have to go after this phrasal verb. Okay, so separable, bring up, to mention a new idea in a conversation, to figure out, to find an answer, give out, to give something to each person in the group, iron out, to solve a small problem, show off, to do things to try to impress people, the inseparable, look up to admire or respect someone, miss out on, to not have a chance to do something you enjoy, and take part in, to participate in something. Okay, so read and fill out. And I'll give you a couple minutes to read and fill this out, and then we will go over the answers. And then also too, if you find in the text any phrasal verbs, you can underline those. So take a couple minutes to read through and fill this out. Okay, we'll be starting soon. So try to finish up your answers. Okay, so let's go over it. Let's go over and see what you got. Okay, so as a college football player, I have to what? I have to bring up some issues I have with esports. When the National Association of Collegiate Esports was formed, I thought this ridiculous idea would never take off. Wrong. Suddenly, colleges are creating varsity gaming teams, and why? Okay, and so creating and giving out scholarships to kids who are really good. I can't figure it out. Why something that requires no strength or real physical training has become a thing. I even had a huge fight about it with my friend who's a gamer. I agree with him that gaming can be exciting, but is it a sport? I mean, come on. My teammates and I had to work really hard at football for years so that we wouldn't. so we wouldn't miss out on scholarships. And here are these nerdy kids who seem to go outside, who never seem to go outside, getting full rides to college for their gaming skills. It's fun, but this stuff isn't academic or athletic. My friend and I are ironing everything out, of course, but I still can't believe these sports have been accepted as real sports. Okay, how did you do? Did you do well? You see the diversity of ways that these phrasal verbs show up, right? And it's okay if you didn't do as well as you'd like. We have another chance. So let's go into the next exercise, and let's do this and see how well we did here. So I'll give you about a minute or two to read through, and then take your best shot at filling in these blanks. Okay, I'm going to be starting shortly and try to finish up your answers. Okay, let's get started. So this is Alima's blog. My brother and I had an argument about gaming. We didn't have a fight or anything, but we had to calm down and listen to each other's views. We both like video games, but he's right. I'm a little hooked on them. For me, video games are exciting and totally fun. My best friend and I love to. What do you think? My best friend and I love to show off our skills to each other, although she's better than I am. I look up to my friend for practicing every day and for winning her first competition last month. She won money and a chance to take part in a huge competition next year for $2 million in prizes. Since she hasn't found a summer job this year, all this gaming practice might turn out really well for her. Okay. Good. So we're going to be finishing this lesson quite soon. And I hope that you're able to see what phrasal verbs are, that they are verbs attached to typically prepositions to create new meanings, and they're one unit of meaning when they're together. If you separate the verb from the preposition, they tend to evoke or convey a different meaning. Okay? So here's our last slide. And the instructions say work with a partner or in a small group, read the statement to make notes saying if you agree or disagree and why. Try to use these three phrasal verbs. Try to use three phrasal verbs, both separable and inseparable from the box, and then discuss the statement. So you are more than welcome to create a dialogue and conversation with your classmates. What we can do is I will read over these sentences and then read over the words and maybe give you some sentences to start with, and then have fun, play around. Again, it's fun. English is fun. Play around with it. If you make mistakes, it's okay. We're all learning, okay? So 1, esports are appropriate as Olympic events. 2, PC gaming is better than mobile gaming. 3, video gaming promotes communication and friendships. 4, video games can cause bad behavior in children. 5, psychological techniques used in game design should be listed as warnings on games. 6, learning from games is better than learning from books. Now you can state your opinion. You may or may not agree with these statements. And so let's look at the words down below. So the separable, again, you can put something in between the two words. Break down to analyze an argument or opinion. Cut off. Cut off, to interrupt a speech. Lay out, to explain a plan or argument. Pass up means to decline. Put off means to postpone. Sum up means to conclude. Tear down, to destroy. Turn over, to give to someone. Use up, to finish the supply or time. Okay, and work out, to be successful. Now the inseparable in this category, you cannot put something in between these words. They have to go after the word. Add up, to seem to be true or reasonable with evidence. Butt in, to interrupt. Cut in, to interrupt. Get back, to return to a topic. Get through, to succeed in or finish. Keep up with, to go as fast as. Log on, log off, to start a computer game or an account, something electronic. Run through, to rehearse. And stick to continue with the topic. So as you're communicating your ideas and your opinions, try to use some of these words in communicating your opinions. So for example, if I say for number 4, video games can cause bad behavior in children, I can maybe support that opinion. I can say I agree that video games can cause bad behavior in children because video games cause children to pass up opportunities to play outside and socialize with children, other children. And it is difficult for children to log off the computer when they need to eat. And computer games tend to use up a lot of time. You see how that works? How about you try it? Well, we've come to the end of our time together. And I hope that this lesson has been very useful for you. Have fun with the language, and you have a good day.